Hello, thank you everybody. So as Paul mentioned, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, and a lot of my work ever since I was a kid has been trying to communicate with people. That's what art really is, right? And that's what good art is anyway, right? You sit in a movie, you watch a show, you hear a song, there's a human connection, right? Even if the person has been dead for hundreds of years, or if they have nothing in common with you, except literally being a human being. There's something that happens there. And that's always been a point of fascination for me, and it's always been the goal of my work, is trying to connect with other human beings and figure out why those connections sometimes don't work, right? Why sometimes we miscommunicate, why sometimes we just don't see where the other person's coming from. And that's where so much of my work is based now. I'm director of messaging and editorial for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, FAIR. You could check us out at fairforall.org. We are an organization that is dedicated to protecting civil rights, individual civil rights and liberties, and promoting a common culture based on fairness, understanding, and humanity. There's a lot of stuff going on in there, so check out the website, you'll see what we're all about. But today, I want to talk to you about communication and how we can do it better. I'm sure all of you have experienced trying to talk to somebody and getting nowhere, getting angry, getting upset, hurling terrible things at one another, completely missing one another's point, right? I'm sure you've had these frustrating encounters with relatives, friends, strangers on the internet, right? Am I right? Okay, so what I'm here to do is to try to help you find a better way, at least to start. A better way to set the ground so that communication can happen in a little bit more, less tense of a way. So I'll start with a small story. When I was about 4 years old, I was watching Sesame Street. And I remember this, for some reason, it never left my mind, even though I was so young. The scene was Snuffleupagus, the big woolly mammoth, and Elmo were both on the street. And they were both on either side of those big blue mailboxes that you see on the street. You guys follow me, right? Okay, I'm not that old that there are no more mailboxes, right? Okay, so they're on either side of the mailbox. So you know Snuffleupagus is this big woolly mammoth, and Elmo is this little Muppet. And they start arguing, and they start saying, the mailbox is really small. And then Elmo says, no, the mailbox is really big. And they just go back and forth. No, it's small. No, it's big. And I don't remember how the scene ends, but what I remember is, because I'm sitting there watching from a different perspective, I can see that because Snuffleupagus is this gigantic woolly mammoth, to him, the mailbox is small. But since Elmo is this tiny little monster, to him, the mailbox is big. And so what they're missing that I got to see is that the truth is different based on their perspective. Right now you can measure the mailbox and say, well, it's exactly this high, and that's the end of the conversation, right? But it's about the perspective. To me, this is small. To me, this is big. And I learned a lot about perspective that day. Something clicked in my head, even though it was so little. And I didn't really think about it again until, 25 years later. But something about that really struck me. And I started to notice that so many of our conversations, so many of our ways of engaging with one another are just like that scene on Sesame Street. We don't see that we're seeing the world through our perspective, and that affects how we see the world. And that the other person coming from their perspective, because there's a difference, in this case it's literally their height, that changes the way they see things. And I became fascinated with that, and I became fascinated with trying to figure out the best way to bridge that divide and make people see from the other side. So I guess that's part of the reason why I'm an artist. And so that brings us to star manning. And I'll explain what that is. It's a thing I made up, so you shouldn't know what it is. But first I'll just start with this saying. It's human nature to value the vanquishing of monsters as an act of power and valor, right? All of our stories are about brave heroes slaying dragons, right? And there's something very human about that. We want to destroy evil. We want to kill the monster. We want to defeat the bad guys, right? That's all of our art, all of our storytelling, since we could write or tell stories, has been about that very visceral desire to get rid of the bad, right? We have this innate thing in us. But once we run out of monsters, or if we can't find any, we'll start making monsters up. And that's the tricky part. We don't notice that we do this. And it's very easy for us to do this because that desire is so strong. But imagine if instead we started to value finding monsters and turning them into men and women. I'm just using alliteration here, so forgive the gender stuff. But that would really be power and valor. That would show a way of transcending that visceral human need and turning it into something even better. And so that's where we're starting here. So to get into the nitty-gritty now. Has anybody heard of straw manning before? Have you heard of the straw man fallacy? Okay, a few people. So basically the straw man fallacy, it's a flaw in argumentation where you inadvertently or sometimes on purpose caricature somebody's perspective, somebody's point of view, somebody's argument, because it's easier to tear it down, right? The reason it's called a straw man is because it's like a scarecrow. It's not going to punch you back. It's not going to move. It's really soft, so you could just beat it up, and it's really easy, right? In an argumentation, the argument, for example, would be, someone says universal basic income. That's a good idea. It could ameliorate the loss of jobs due to automation, right? That's what someone says. A straw man of that would be, you want people to sit at home all day and just get free money, right? That's not at all what that person was trying to say, and certainly that's not what they're actually arguing. But it's a way of twisting their argument to make it seem ridiculous so that you can dismiss it, right? So a more contentious example. So if someone is for abortion, the straw man is, you want to murder babies. If someone is against abortion, you want to control women's bodies, right? Those are the arguments you hear on either side of this very contentious issue that caricature where that person's coming from. So the perils of straw manning, it's dishonest, right? Especially if you're doing it on purpose. It's counterproductive because you're not actually arguing with what the person means. You're arguing with a cartoon version, right? So you're wasting time. Your time, their time, everybody's time. And it makes monsters of people who disagree with you, right? Because who would believe something so silly? Who would believe something so evil, something so wrong, so obviously wrong? Only a bad person, only a monster, right? But that's not the reality. Now, steel manning is what you should do. You all know this guy. I'm a big fan. So steel manning is the antidote to straw manning. It's what you're meant to be doing. And steel manning is engaging with the strongest possible version of the argument. So in practice, it's basically repeat their position back to them. They tell you what they think, repeat it back in your own words. And if they respond by saying, yes, that's exactly what I mean, you have steel manned. And you get bonus points, actually, if you can restate it in a way where they go, you know what, that's even better than what I was saying. Or you've actually found a stronger place from which I can argue what I'm trying to argue. That's bonus points. That means you're really engaging. That means you're really trying to find out what's true, what matters. If you can improve upon their argument, you get bonus points, right? You're showing, hey, I'm really here to listen. I'm really here to understand you. And I'm really here to figure this out. We might not get anywhere. We might still disagree at the end of this, but I'm trying. And that allows the person to kind of settle a little bit, they get more comfortable, and now maybe you can talk. So the argument for UBI, right? They say, I think it would be a good thing to kind of offset the problems of automation. People are losing their jobs, like, for example, automated cashiers and things like that, right? Some of these jobs are just getting lost because of technology. So instead of straw manning, you would steel man. The steel man would be, you want to decouple work from basic economic security, right? So that the changing landscape of labor, however it ends up going in the next 10 years, 20 years, it doesn't lead to swaths of people being left poor and without any options, right? That's a stronger way of approaching things. So the pro-abortion thing, someone who's pro-abortion is, you want to preserve bodily autonomy. You think this is important. My ability to make my own decisions about what happens to me and with me, that's really important, right? If you're against abortion, you want to protect the unborn. There's a human life there, and you care very much about their welfare. And that's what's motivating you. That's where you're coming from, right? So people say, there are a lot of arguments people make against steel manning, right? Why should I help strengthen terrible or immoral arguments, right? But you're already kind of infusing the morality, right? You're saying this is already wrong. I have nothing to learn here. I have nothing to discuss here. Well, not all arguments are as morally or intellectually settled as something like racism or Nazism, which are the examples people generally bring up, right? Everybody in this room can say, no, of course racism is terrible. Of course Nazis are, that's a terrible idea, right? But when it gets into the granular stuff, like a political, like a bill, or a particular economic policy, that's a little more difficult, and it's not so settled, right? And it's also always important to remember that you might be the one who's misunderstanding something. You might be the one who's mistaken, because you're coming from your own perspective, your own education, your own experiences. You might have missed something. Speaking to somebody is an opportunity to get something you didn't understand before, even if it's just another way of recognizing that you're on the right path, right? The argument might be settled for you, but it clearly is not settled for the other person. And the fact is, we need to live together and communicate with one another in order to make any kind of progress. So even though it's obvious to you, even though you think this is a no-brainer, how could you not wake up in the morning and just know this? Well, people come from different places, different backgrounds, different experiences, different educations, and it all affects how they think. So the conversation is still worth having, even if you think this is a waste of time, right? It's not a waste of time for this person. It's almost like thinking, and this is a slightly condescending thing, but it's almost like thinking, why do we still have kindergartners, right? We already know our colors. We already know the alphabet. Why do we still have kindergarten? Well, some people are 5 years old. That's kind of what's going on, right? But you have to also always be careful to remember that you might be the 5-year-old without realizing it. You might be the 5-year-old in this conversation with respect to this argument. It might be you. Always remember that. Never be certain about anything, except that you don't know it all. If you can think of a better version of an argument, for example, and then you don't address it or you don't bring it up. So if someone's arguing something and you know that there's actually a better point they could be making, if you know that there's a stronger version of their position and you don't engage with it, you're wasting your time and their time, because that stronger version, someone's going to find out about it. Someone's going to bring it up, and then you have all your work ahead of you. You still have to refute it. You still have to discuss it. You still have to engage with it. So you might as well skip the easy bit and just get to the strong version. Just say, you know what? Where you're coming from, I've heard this before. Here's actually a better thing that I heard. It's actually more compelling. It's actually more interesting. It's actually a little bit more complicated and difficult. Let's engage with that, right? You're just jumping to the end. I don't like wasting time. We have such little time as it is, right? We get this one life. So I just want to jump right to it. Let's get to the really hard stuff, right? Let's get to the boss level. So other people say, to steel man, I must abandon my sense of logic and reasoning. This is a classic misunderstanding of what steel manning is. Steel manning doesn't mean agreeing with or condoning the other argument. It just means understanding it fully. For example, one can understand the reasoning behind a fundamentalist Christian calling for prayer in schools or being against gay marriage without actually holding the beliefs yourself or advocating for them, right? It's kind of the same thing as a good math teacher can understand how a student arrived at a particular wrong answer without suddenly changing their mind about the correct answer, right? They know the math, but because they're looking and understanding, they know how you got to the wrong answer. And what happens when you know how somebody gets to the wrong answer? You can guide them, help them to the right one. And again, always remember, you might be the one with the wrong answer. So why doesn't steel manning work? Right? Why don't you see this so often, especially on the internet? Why don't you see this? Well, unfortunately, the issue is that we're not just straw manning each other's arguments, each other's perspectives, we're straw manning each other. We're creating caricatures of the other person who holds the argument that we disagree with. And that's what I mean about monsters. We're making monsters of people based on the things that they think or say or do that we disagree with. We're making monsters of men and women of different minds. And once we do that, anything that they say, anything that they do becomes monstrous, right? Because what are monsters? Monsters are, by definition, beneath contempt. Monsters are not people you save. Monsters are people you vanquish. When we see one another as monsters, all we get is mayhem. And we need to stop that. So what do we do when everyone we disagree with is not just mistaken, but monstrous? And when those who differ with us feel the same way about us, that's always the thing people forget, right? It's like, no, that person's a terrible person because they believe X, Y, Z. Well, guess what? They think the same thing about you. And you go, well, of course, I'm not a monster. I'm right. But they think the same thing. So what do? How do we fix this? And that's where Starmanning comes in. So there's a David Bowie song called Starman. And I heard it one day, and it just clicked in my head. Straw man, steel man, Starman. And so the idea is, to Starman is to not only engage with the strongest possible version of the opponent's argument, which is steel manning, it's to go a step further. It's kind of like the platinum rule with respect to the golden rule, right? It's you treat the person making the argument in the most charitable way. You try to find, why does this person believe that this is good and right? What is motivating them? What are the human desires motivating them? So you acknowledge their good intentions, even if they're wrong, or even if you think they're wrong. You acknowledge that they have good intentions. They're trying to do what they believe is right based on the information they have. So the argument is universal basic income, right? The Starman of it is you want to decouple work from economic security so that the landscape of labor changing in the next 10 years, 20 years doesn't lead to poverty. And the reason you care about this is the Starmanning part. The reason you care about this is because you think it will help people lead better, freer, more fulfilled lives, right? You're concerned about human well-being. And that's why you think a universal basic income will help lift people up. It will help avoid problems of people losing jobs and having no options. You care about that. You're thinking of people suffering and you want to do something about it. And this is the conclusion you've come to. That's Starmanning. That's finding the human reason why this person cares about what they're saying. Starmanning is founded on one very, very simple, and I would argue extremely safe assumption. Most people, most of the time, are doing what they believe is good, right, and just, or at the very least, justifiable means to righteous ends. So yes, they might say, yes, I know I'm lying. Yes, I know I'm stealing. But I'm lying and stealing because. And everything that comes after that because, is there a reason why it's still the right thing to do? Now again, they might be mistaken about that, right? That the ends may not justify the means. I'm somebody who says the ends never justify the means. But that's where they're coming from, and it's important to remember that. Those righteous ends matter. So very few people, very, 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 very few people are consciously acting to make the world a worse place to live, right? Not many people are waking up in the morning, twirling their mustache and saying, how can I cause the most suffering, right? How can I make people feel as bad as possible? How can I make people as miserable as I possibly can today, right? Do you know anybody who wakes up thinking like that? No. Most people are saying, no, I'm doing what I got to do. I'm doing what's right. I'm doing the thing that I should be doing. And whatever their reasons are, that's what they think. And everyone at bottom is a human being. Everyone in this room, everyone in this campus, everyone in this city, everyone in this country, everyone in this world is a human being. And as human beings, we have fundamental things in common. We have fundamental desires in common, right? If we turn the temperature in this room up to 150, every single one of us would start sweating. Every single one of us would start being really uncomfortable, right? If we sit in this room for another 12 hours, doesn't matter if you ate 20 minutes ago, you're gonna be hungry, right? 12 hours, you're probably gonna get hungry. 24, definitely, right? You're gonna have to eat something, or you're gonna get thirsty. That's a human thing. We just know it. It's part of our wiring. And everyone is everything that everyone does, everything that everyone is looking for is trying to fulfill basic needs that we all have as human beings. And I call those safety, security, satisfaction, and success. That's what we're all looking for. All our desires, all our behaviors, all of our wants, they all boil down to trying to fulfill some combination of these four things, right? How those desires manifest themselves, how those desires end up looking like in the real world, that varies because we're all diverse human beings. We all have different experiences and perspectives, right? So we might have the same goal of, I want success, but what does success mean to me versus you? It's different. It depends. It depends on a million things. So the variety and diversity is still there. But the fundamental thing is, yeah, I want to feel safe, I want to feel secure, I want to feel successful, and I want to feel satisfied with my life. And the root of star manning is compassion. Different people have different upbringings, educations, experiences, and temperaments. And all of those things mix together to inform their opinions and behaviors. So as a result, we will often have conflicting or competing ideas about how to move forward in the world, right? I think we should do it this way. No, I think we should do it this way. But the thing that we have in common is we want to move forward. How many people do you know would say, no, I don't want progress. I don't want things to get better? Almost nobody, probably nobody, right? I can't imagine somebody saying, no, I don't want things to get better. They're fine, right? Even if they think things are great right now. Well, wouldn't you want things to get 10 times better than that? Yeah, that sounds awesome. Why not, right? Everyone's got that in their head. But how they want to get there and what that means, that's the part that's different. That's the part that's interesting. And compassion is the recognition that most people are acting out of a sincere desire to make the world or their world a better place to live, even if they're mistaken. And that knowledge, that foundation, allows us to approach a disagreement differently. The truth is that most people aren't monsters at all. They're just sometimes under the sway of bad ideas. And it's not like a bad idea came and haunted them and possessed their body, and now they're just running around doing crazy things. It's the same as why you believe what you believe and why those things are propelling your behavior. You're all here because you have some fundamental belief in this being the right thing to do. This allowing you to get to the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? That's an idea. The idea is this is good for me, this will put me in a better position. It's that sort of thing, right? So it's not this spooky boogeyman. It's just a fundamental idea of, well, these are the things I think are true about my reality, and I'm going to act according to those things. I'm not going to do the opposite. That doesn't make any sense. But people don't really think about that. People don't really think about why they do what they do. They just think, well, this is just true, and this is just real, and I'm just doing what you should be doing. Everything is common sense, except it's not common, right? And that includes us. That's the thing. We might be under the sway of bad ideas and not know it. You don't know you're wrong until you find out you're wrong. And that's another reason why communication is so important. Another reason why going across the divide and talking to people whose perspectives you don't understand, that's why it's so valuable. Even just for purely selfish, self-interested reasons, you should engage with people you disagree with because you want to make sure you're on the right track. So if you see somebody, like I do, I'll find somebody on Twitter, for example, and I'll say, this person seems smart, but everything that comes out of their mouth seems crazy to me. How on earth could they have come to those conclusions? Why on earth would they have this perspective? Follow. That's what you should be doing, because I want to know if I'm wrong about something. And if this person seems smart, but they're coming from a totally different place and they've come to totally different conclusions, that means I can learn something. even if it's just that I actually turned out to be right. But now I know for sure. I'm even more sure that I'm right because I engaged with a counter argument that I couldn't even conceive of myself. Right? So, star manning the pro-abortion stance, right? Imagine telling somebody who's for abortion, you believe that there are circumstances in which a woman may want or need to terminate a pregnancy. And because women's bodily autonomy is a hard-won right, and it's worthy of protection, you're in favor of those rights. Imagine someone hearing that instead of being attacked. Now you can actually have a conversation. Imagine if on the other side, someone says, you believe that an unborn fetus is an innocent human being with the right to live, but no power to advocate for itself. And because killing innocent human beings is immoral and unacceptable, you're against abortion rights. Now you have a place where you can meet. Of course, killing innocent human beings is morally unacceptable, right? Of course, it makes sense for somebody to feel very strongly about that. Now you've understood where they're coming from. You've taken their perspective and you've connected with it in a human way. Now, none of this solves the issue of this contentious topic, but it makes the kinds of interactions that can resolve the issue in the future possible. Without this, we can never get anywhere. We will never come to an understanding because we need to talk to each other. So star manning in practice. Here's a quick 1, 2, 3. Restate their argument in a way that they'd agree with. That's steel manning, right? The first level is steel manning. Number 2, locate and explicitly acknowledge the fundamental desires, motivating them, and how you share those desires, right? I care very much about human well-being. I also care about people who are suffering. I want to do something about that too. But here's where I disagree with you. Here's where I think maybe you're not seeing the way that your perspective is actually going to lead to more harm, right? Now you're having a conversation. Now you're doing the thing. And the best part is, the most important part is, use we language and not us, them, or me, you language. And what I mean by that is, okay, we'll do the UBI thing, right? So you think that the government should send out a set amount of money to everyone every month as a kind of baseline, because that way no one will live beneath a certain level of dignity. No one will live beneath a certain level of self-sustainability, right? And that allows people to have more options, right? They can try to open a new business. They can seek out education so that they can, jump to another career, right? All of these things become possible. Now, I really care about that. I think it's a great idea for people to have options and for people to be able to move forward. I definitely don't want people to be suffering. I definitely don't want people to be poor and starving, right? But here's the thing. I feel like there are some problems if we just do UBI the way that you're proposing it. But what if we tried to figure out another way? What if we did, this program or that program? What if we instead instituted more kind of programs in school that are part of the school system? And we did it this way. Did you see what I did there? I switched from you think this, I think this, to what if we did this? Now you are partners in trying to solve a problem. Now you've found a way to connect with that person and say, look, I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to figure this out. You want to figure it out? I want to figure it out. We're coming from different places, but we can try to figure it out together because we have that same goal of moving forward. We have that same goal of mitigating suffering, of giving people more options, of helping people flourish, right? Always remember that there is a human being, especially when you're doing this on the internet. This is something you need to remember. There is a human being, a living, breathing human being, full of flaws, faults, dreams, aspirations, pain, love, everything else that makes up the human experience. These are people who maybe they have kids and they love their children. Maybe they have spouses, partners. They love their spouses and partners. They love their families. They go out and they smile and have a great time, right? These are not monsters. These are people who have their lives, people who love them, and people who they love. Even though you disagree on this thing, remember that. That's a human being. And remember that that's what you want. You want them to remember that you're a human being and that you are not solely the sum total of this argument or this position or this political perspective, right? You're way more than that. So give other people that same charity, that same compassion. Engage with honesty, humility, compassion, and humanity, always. If you find yourself getting agitated, stop. Say to them, hey, I'm feeling a little tense. This topic gets me riled up. Maybe we'll pick it up again. And this is another key thing that I think everyone should walk away with. When you're engaging with somebody and disagreeing, the victory is not changing their mind. I know that's what it sounds like, that's what it feels like we should be doing, right? But really, the victory is, if you walk away from that disagreement, open to having another conversation, that's the victory. Because who knows, 10, 20 conversations down the line, who knows what might happen for them or for you or for both. You might both be wrong, and you might both find a better place together. And it only happens because you're having these conversations, because you're engaging in this way. Thank you very much.